It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, mate, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day and welcome to the Two Jacks coming to you in the year 2026, our first episode for the year, and we want to wish all our listeners a very happy and prosperous 2026. When I say we, that is Hong Kong Jack joining me as usual. How are you, mate? How are things in Hong Kong?
I've got to say the air is looking prosperous. I was up on the near the peak yesterday, and I looked out, and there was haze everywhere. And you might think that's a bad sign, but if you're a Hong Konger, it's actually a good sign. That means those factories over the border are pumping stuff out left, right, and centre, and the economy is going a little bit better.
Yeah, well, we had a fair bit of smoke over this part of the world too, Jack, and it was difficult to tell. We had a cool change after a heat wave, really across Australia, and of course fires on the weekend, the worst of those in Victoria, so there was it was difficult to tell whether there was mist or whether it was smoke, but it was probably a combination of both, and we're a long way from them. But yeah, there were some awful fires around Victoria. The worst of them was the Longwood fire, and anyone who's driven up the Hume would know where Longwood is. And conditions on Sunday really were terrible, as I understand it. Very hot, very dry, high winds as well. So fires, it looked like Eildon, Jack. Eildon was in all sorts of trouble, but the town avoided that. There has been one casualty, a cattle farmer from the Longwood area, Max Hobson, unfortunately passed in the flames. And for all that, Jack, if we go back to Black Saturday many, many years ago now, where there was enormous loss of life in Victoria, it seems after the Royal Commission and its investigations into where failures had occurred, just to have unfortunately one dead, but which is always one too many, but the fact that they had such little loss of life, a lot of property losses, about 350 houses gone, it shows that the communications are much better. And it also shows that people are doing they are vacating their houses. You can replace a property, but you can't replace lives, of course. So I think that was the story that came out of the fires, particularly in Victoria, that people now are evacuating, taking their getting their bushfire plans in place and acting on them. So that was a good, that was a good outcome. I mean, it's terrible for those people who have lost property, of course, but they are alive and they will work their way through it.
Yeah, I have a daughter who lives in the area, Concern, or just near it, not far from Mount Macedon, and they had a fire just over the ridge from them, and. The information was terrific. I could see where the fire was on my screen here in Hong Kong, and so could she. And they drove up to the top of the hill and realised it was stinking hot and windy, and it was time to put the kids in the car and get out before it got too late. The Hayes boys, they lost 90% of their land at Lindsay Park at Euroa. And they had 227 horses on the property.
They got them all out.
Which they had to get out, all that kind of stuff. They lost 7, but it's a miraculous thing to get them out. Yeah.
I think there is much better communications coming through when we look at the Black Saturday fires in Victoria. The technology just wasn't there. So people are receiving text messages. People can go to the Fires Near Me app and see exactly what's going on. You can actually also tap into the CFA radio bands as well online and see where everything is as well. But good decisions are being made about leaving property and evacuating and riding it out.
And people have gotten more sensible about that.
Yeah,
I think
there's, look, people, I know a lot of people will stand and fight for their properties, but I think there's also a decision being made that this is way too dangerous and time for us to leave, grab our pets, grab everything that's dear to us, particularly ID and birth certificates, those passports, those sorts of things, and just get out and go to an evacuation centre and ride it out. Lovely story from Alexandra, the CFA boys there. They saved that town, and if you looked at the map, there was this sort of little pincer movement where the town of Alexandra survived. There were some property losses outside of town, but the CFA had this plan to save the town, which ultimately was successful. And one of those firefighters had been involved in what they call strike teams, and they had done a great deal with others in the CFA to ensure that Alexandra was not engulfed with fire. And having done that for the day, one of the CFA firefighters was told that his property had been destroyed. He promptly went out there and found that it was destroyed. Nothing much he could do at that stage, and some of his colleagues in the CFA said, "Look, we're going to go and do some more work, but look, you can do whatever you like. You must be just completely stunned by what's happened." And he said, "No, look, I'll get in the truck and we'll move on." And he there was an interview on the ABC. This guy's an absolute hero. His wife is also a volunteer. The people of Alexandra rallied around them. They're currently living in a Airbnb, or a place that's made available to tourists as an Airbnb, and they're staying there while they rebuild their home and so forth. But just an astonishing sort of thing. The volunteers in this country, whether they're CFA or whether they're volunteering to assist people in some other way, are just astonishing people. The real Australia in many ways.
If you're looking for somewhere to send a bit of money, there's a bloke I knew many years ago runs a thing called Blaze Aid. He's a farmer, and basically what they do is they volunteers pitch in and help farmers rebuild fencing and things like that. Right.
Okay.
A vital thing,
without looking at. I can see it now. They're joined Blaze Aid, top volunteer organisation.
And what the money goes to is to set up camps so the volunteers can go and stay somewhere there and work on places while they're there.
Yeah,
the money gets spent back in the community, and the farmers get some fencing and that sort of thing done.
All right. Okay. Well, moving on. Those fires are still burning, particularly Longwood, and we wish all the CFA guys all the very, very best in bringing them to on putting them out. But this fellow, this astonishing fellow from Alexandra, he made the prediction that it would be getting worse again towards the end of this week. We're recording on the 13th of January. On the Tuesday, but weather conditions are likely to get much worse in Victoria later in the week. So Godspeed to all those people.
Nice little town, Alexandra.
It is a lovely little town. Yea was another one that was saved. It's a lovely town in just north of Melbourne, and that was a very good thing too. Driven mainly by the fact that people at risk decided to evacuate on time. And didn't put their lives at risk. So well done them. Kevin Rudd has resigned as a US ambassador. a US administration official told The Australian this morning when this news broke that Ambassador Rudd worked well with President Trump and the administration. We wish him well. So it doesn't appear to be any business of retribution for some of Kevin Rudd's remarks about the current president. He's simply moving on.
And there didn't seem to be when at the time either.
No, there weren't. There was a bit of joking and about it all at the time. So he is now going on to take up a new role as global president of the Asia Society. So what do you make of that, Jack?
Look, there's often a bit of a kerfuffle. If people are inclined to be public about their political opinions and then take a job as an ambassador, there are sometimes some things that need tidying up. And it looks to me like it was tidied up okay.
Yeah. I think we could only look at the meeting between Albanese and Trump as a success for Australia. Jack, a Royal Commission has been announced. A federal Royal Commission has been announced with the Commissioner, the retired High Court Justice Virginia Bell. Firstly, before we get into the terms of reference and letters patent and what have you, why did it take Anthony Albanese so long to come to this decision?
It's hard to say. I suspect they were trying to be a bit clever politically, but I was just astounded that they were running a debate, an argument in public as to the reasons not to have one. And I can't remember a government losing an argument or a debate so clearly. They were, it just wasn't holding up, their argument.
No.
And yet they kept pushing on and pushing on and pushing on. It was bizarre politics for me. That said, I watched the Prime Minister's press conference when he announced the Royal Commission, and he did a really good job. You almost thought that this was their plan all along, right? And it clearly wasn't, but you almost thought that. And my view of the politics is that if in 3 months' time people look back at that and say, look, really, the government messed up with that. They were a bit slow, but they got it right eventually. And if you get to that point, that's a real win for Labor, because they were suffering, I think, with the failure.
It seemed to be dragged on unnecessarily for too long. I suspect too that people have perceptions about Royal Commissions that are not supported by Royal Commissions that we've seen in the past. The one that it's actually not a Royal Commission. The one that I was sort of getting back to was the judicial inquiry into the Lindt Cafe siege, Jack. And I don't know if you remember it, but virtually every police officer, everyone in attendance at that time, whether they had taken action or whether they were senior police or whether there was apparently a psychiatrist there advising police as well, all were given code names. And a lot of evidence was held in secret. I suspect this will be similar in that there'll be national security reasons for holding hearings in camera, that there will be, particularly around counter-terrorism agents, whether they work at state or federal level, they can't be identified. So there will be a level of security that I don't think people are really understanding. Will a level of secrecy, I suppose, that people don't understand at the moment. And so, I mean, it's kind of one of those things. Be careful what you wish for.
That might have been an argument the government could have run at the time, but they didn't. But they didn't at all.
I know. It was quite astonishing to see groups of people come in and say, we demand a Royal Commission, and ultimately these voices were listened to. But I did say there were a group of sports people. I think Dawn Fraser was one, and there are others. And Wayne Carey had called for a Royal Commission, Jack. Eh? Do you think that was the thing that tipped the government's view on this? Well, Wayne Carey thinks we need a Royal Commission. Yeah, we better have one. No.
Well, I always think those using celebrities of any kind, whether they're actors or footballers or cricketers or whatever, is slightly bizarre to me. I don't think they convince anyone much. I mean, people can say, "Gee, I love watching him. I love watching her on the screen. Or I love watching him play footy," but I'm not going to take them as a political guide in life. You know?
Yeah, exactly right. So we do have a commissioner announced now. It is, of course, retired High Court Justice Virginia Bell. Prior to her announcement, but obviously with the government sort of releasing some information or drip feeding things out, Josh Frydenberg just decried the choice of Virginia Bell. Tell me what you know about it, Jack.
Nothing that would disqualify her from being a royal commissioner, I've got to say, you know.
An eminent jurist, Jack.
Yeah. Well, you don't get to the High Court if you're a dill, and clearly her record. She's on the New South Wales Court of Appeal, which is the best appeals court apart from the High Court in the country. So clearly she is quite bright. Now, if Josh Frydenberg had a case to make against her, he failed to make it.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, and do we need to remind Josh Frydenberg how his political career ended, Jack?
Yeah.
I mean,
has it ended?
Well, who knows? We won't get into that because we might draw his criticism. But Virginia Bell, I do know just a little bit of trivia. She was a barrister. She was a solicitor and then became a barrister, and she worked in defence cases for a period of time. Then she became a prosecutor after that, and then, as you say, a judge. I think she a justice in the Supreme Court, and then on the full bench, and then to the High Court. But while she was a lawyer working in defence, she represented Chris Flannery.
Did she?
In a New South Wales murder case. She got it no-billed, ultimately. It should have been no-billed a little earlier. Chris Flannery didn't do this, by the way. It's a really intriguing story that I will tell this year, I think, in a magazine piece. But Chris Flannery had a rock-solid alibi, and the forensic guy gave evidence, and ultimately he couldn't decide between AMs and PMs. Because what they got with the time of death could not have been Flannery. I mean, he was in Melbourne at the time, and the murder victim, a man by the name of Ray Loxley, he was found dead in Menai with 4 shots to his chest. It was probably a blue murder, and they thought, well, we'll charge Chris because he's known as a hitman. So, Virginia Bell got that ultimately no-billed, but it ultimately came about because the forensic officer had passed away. So it was a bit of a fit-up.
She also appeared on television as a barrel girl.
Yes, she did too, yeah. I've got one other story, but I can't tell. But she was very active in prison reform in her early years as well. So the 4 key areas as set out in letters patent, Jack, I'll read them through for our listeners. Tackling anti-Semitism by investigating the nature and prevalence of anti-Semitism in institutions and society and its key drivers in Australia, including ideologically and religiously motivated extremism and radicalisation. That's point 1. Point 2, making recommendations that will assist law enforcement, border control, immigration and security agencies to tackle anti-Semitism, including through improvements to guidance and training within law enforcement, border control, immigration and security agencies to respond to anti-Semitic conduct. Point 3 is examining the circumstances surrounding the anti-Semitic Bondi terrorist attack on 14th December 2025. And finally, the last point is making any other recommendations arising out of the inquiry for strengthening social cohesion in Australia and countering the spread of ideologically and religiously motivated extremism in Australia. Those are fairly broad areas, Jack, for it to be. I hesitate to use the word terms of reference because I don't think those are finalised. But those four key areas that gives the Commission a significant amount of room to investigate a whole raft of things beyond, but including the Bondi attack.
It does. And I don't think the Bondi attack should be the sole focus in this. I mean, there's clearly something has gone wrong with the Jews in Australia, where they've had to have armed security at schools and synagogues for 30 years. That's a shame to Australia, really. We're getting something wrong about that. And there are other problems that have got to be addressed as well. So I think that if they're going to be the terms of reference, I think they probably are, they're fine.
Yes, so they're not nailed down yet. There'll be the Parliament is resuming, I think, next week, and there'll be some debate over these 4 points, and they will lead more or less to the terms of reference. But they are broad enough, I think, for a commission to look at things. I like that they're looking at immigration, Jack. And there was some criticism they're not doing enough there, but I think when we look at immigration security agencies and how they might perform better, I think that's a very good thing too. I mean, there will clearly be some embarrassment for some of our security and law enforcement bodies because we do know that Naveed Akram was cleared in 2019. His old man had sought a shooter's license in 2016. He reapplied in 2020. He left a photo out in the 2016 application. So let's go back. Naveed Akram, how does he get cleared? What processes were involved there? Was his father interviewed? Were other family men interviewed? Members, I should say. Other friends, etc. We do know that he was in the thrall of one of the hate preachers, and that he was an associate of a fellow who was subsequently convicted of terrorism. This guy was a sort of self-appointed leader of Islamic State in Australia, and he was mainly a fantasist. He was trying to arrange things that he didn't have the wherewithal to do, and he was ultimately jailed for 4.5 years. But Naveed Akram was one of his associates and was cleared. That meant that he was not on a watch list. He would not be under any sort of supervision. And then we got the licensing, Jack. His father had applied for a shooter's license. Then 3 years later, he got it. I don't understand the delay there. I, like many Australians, think, if you're not an Australian citizen, how can you get a gun license? And that's something that might be looked at. I believe that changed, Jack, when New Zealand hunters were brought into the country to eradicate feral animals. And so there was a little bit of a loophole there, but I would think one of those recommendations, you must be an Australian citizen to have a gun license in this country.
Yeah.
Lots of things will happen there, but I suspect that a lot of it will be held in camera, particularly around joint terrorism. I mean, as I say, it's a criminal offence to name a counter-terrorism officer, state or federal. So when those guys are giving evidence, it'll be A320, code name attached, and no media allowed.
Yeah. I think the Royal Commission looks fine. I'm less relaxed about the changes, about how the changes to hate speech laws, etc., will pan out. They kind of make me nervous. I think it's very easy to make things worse rather than better in that area.
Joel has been talking about a case down in rural New South Wales where an artist has sought to satirise a lot of anti-Semitism and neo-Nazism, and in doing so, his artworks have featured Nazi symbols. Now he's in the business of satire, but he's currently being charged, Jack, and it's not no laughing matter. This has been dragging on for 2 years now. This guy has really struggled with this prosecution. I'd see another guy who had a tattoo on some part of his body anyway, a Nazi symbol there. He's also been prosecuted. It's a pretty stupid thing to do, and he should have the tattoo removed if he's got any good sense. But I'm not sure that charging people for those sorts of things is the right way to go. Criminalising speech, whether it's hate speech, whatever it is a really vexed issue.
Well, look at the Kathy Wilcox cartoon kerfuffle.
I was almost going to mention that today, but yeah. When you saw it and without the hubbub, what did you think?
Oh, look! I thought it was a drive-by sledge of the people who were pushing for the Royal Commission, and that's fine. That's politics. I mean, and Channel 9 comes out with an apology that doesn't really apologise. It just says we're sorry if you were offended, right? Yeah, which is they're the piss weak, mealy mouthed apologies people do. What they should have come out and said is, you are not always meant to agree with the cartoon, with the political cartoon. That's not what they're there for. They're there to put an idea, right? And you don't have to agree with it. This is what we do, you know. I mean, but no one seems to have the courage just to make that really simple point. This is political cartooning. People are going to put a point of view that maybe you don't agree with. Yeah? Wouldn't
be the first time an editorial cartoon attracted a bit of furor, Jack.
No, it isn't. Well, look at your mate Bill. I could, at least the Australian had the guts to say, no, this is a political cartoon, right? You know.
Yeah, and look, there was a furor about it, but the whole business is that we are trying to prevent people from being offended. Well, that's not what newspapers should be about.
No, none of us should be about that.
Adelaide Writers' Festival, Jack, I'm not even sure that it's going to go on.
Have you joined up? Because there'll be a spot there. There's a couple of spots there.
Might be a spot there for me. Tim Dalton has checked out, the wonderful Tim Dalton, former writer at the Australian. He's not attending. No one's quite sure if Julia Baird, who was due to interview him, will be there or not. Who else have we got? ABC radio presenters, the wonderful David Marr. Do like David very much. He's such a good guy. And Jonathan Green, who I know, had confirmed that
he's the ABC Melbourne chap, isn't he?
Johnny Green, yeah, and they've confirmed that they're not going in.
You left out Dr. Peter Fitzsimons.
No, haven't got there yet. Others to quit the event include the commentators Jane Carrow, Peter Fitzsimons.
Dr. Peter Fitzsimons, have you
well, yes, Doctor. I'm not sure where he got that from. Was that an honorarium or an honorary doctorate? I don't know that he's done any study.
Probably, but he's taken to using it, which I always think it's quite comical when people do that.
There are some big names beyond him. I mean, Peter Grest, the journalist and academic, First Nations academic and writer, Professor Chelsea Wattago, political analyst Amy Ramikis, formerly of The Guardian, now with the Australian Institute, and a bigger name perhaps even than all of those before them, the economist Yanis Varoufakis.
Yeah. Yes. And Louise Adler's resigned this morning.
And Louisa Adler did resign this morning. Australian authors Bree Lee, who is really hot right now, and Madeline Gray said they would not participate unless the festival reversed its decision and reinstated Randa Abdul Fattah, a Macquarie University academic. Writers Helen Garner, Chloe Hooper, Miles Franklin winner Michelle de Kretzer, and a number of other authors, as I say, Trent Dalton, who's probably the hottest writer in Australia at the moment. And after 4 days of turmoil, Louise Adler has resigned. I did see a number of her critics have come forward to say that she sort of created this situation in the first place, and perhaps sort of hinting that she'd done so deliberately. But in her own words, Louise Adler has said, "I cannot be party to silencing writers." She wrote a piece for The Guardian today. Writers and writing matters, even when they are presenting ideas that discomfort and challenge us, she wrote. We won't go on with the quote there, but that's actually quite reasonable, Jack. The Writers' Festival should be a forum of some dangerous ideas.
If there's a problem with writers' festivals in Australia, is it's a lack of diversity of opinion, and I've got no problem with this woman coming along and speaking. Even if you don't agree with her ideas, let people see who she is. Let people see what she's got to say. Right?
I think so too. Maury Schwartz was one of Louise Adler's critics. Maury Schwartz, of course, is the publisher of the Saturday paper. He criticised Adler for knowingly harming the event, saying she was aware programming the controversial author would be ruinous for the 66-year-old literary festival.
I haven't seen this theory that she sabotaged her own writers' festival. This is a bizarre theory.
It's a little bit odd, but that's what Maury Schwartz has claimed she has done, knowingly harming the event. Maybe she didn't want to go to Adelaide, Jack.
That's bizarre. I've got to say. I mean, I don't go to these things, but I look through the lists of writers, and there isn't a hell of a lot of diversity. I've got to be said in these. More diversity would improve writers' festivals in Australia, in my view.
Look, I mean, we've just gone through the list of them. I mean, Helen Garner, Trent Dalton. I mean, that is many others, of course, that I've known before. There is a broad reach there. So, I don't know. I mean, like you, I'm uneasy about people being banned or forced out due to public opinion. Let them be heard and make your own minds up, guys.
Yeah, even if you disagree with them, what you should be saying is let them be heard so we can all see just how bad they are.
Exactly right. It's not like just someone appearing in a forum is a way of on behalf of the festival, saying we agree with everything that this woman says. It's not the case at all. She's just merely being platformed. All right, the first polls for the year are in, Jack, and One Nation. My Lord. They're up to this is a Demos poll, wasn't it? Daily Telegraph job.
It was, but there's been another one since, which is much the same, I got to say. So.
Yeah, Labor 29 down 4 points. LNP running neck and neck with One Nation at 23. Greens down by 1 at 12. And when you get the two-party preferred, it's 52-48 the LNP, or if you went with the One Nation one, it's 50-50. Not sure that I'm buying that, Jack. New federal voting intention. What is this? Is this males or females? Well, look, summarising, One Nation's up about 15 points. Now, yes. I'm seeing a lot of parking of support there. To see One Nation sing. I mean, a lot of people from the coalition will have done so. Perhaps even Labor have said something of a protest vote in a poll.
Yes. It's similar sort of things happening in the UK with reform. There's a fair bit of vote parking there. Yeah. You wonder how much that will stick. It's sort of in a straight leadership battle, for the best leader, like Kemi Badenoch leads Nigel Farage by 10 points, for instance, if there was a battle between those two. So you wonder how much of this is simply parking votes in the interim until they're sure of what they're going to be voting for.
Yeah, look, we haven't got it up for discussion today, but if we look at Reform's polling, that seems to be on a bit of a slide now, Jack. And, it was in the sort of low 30s, and now it's sort of coming back to about 25. There have been a few issues around that might have driven that. But you do get the sense around Reform and One Nation that that their polling is reflecting at least a sort of protest from supporters of the major parties.
Yeah, the difference between the UK and Australia is in the UK the government's viewed as hopeless. So there's a whole lot of everyone's looking around for who else you vote for, right? The Labor Party in Australia is not anywhere near that kind of trouble. But
talking to a mate yesterday or last night, lives in London. He said, I think it's the sixth back down, fiscal back down. They've made this one. This one was taxing pubs. They're back down on that.
The business tax on pubs.
Yeah. They've backed away from that. They did so yesterday, or announced it yesterday, and it comes in a sort of a welter of back downs of the fiscal variety, if not straight out taxation. It shows, I guess, that they're listening, but you've got to say, why make these mistakes in the first part? Look, yes, we do know that they need to generate revenue. They've got a serious debt problem, but they're getting the taxation mix probably quite wrong, and that's why they're unpopular.
I've never seen a government with a majority that size and no election for another 3 years just in so much trouble.
Yeah, it's quite astonishing, isn't it? It's like they sort of fell ass backwards into government. But getting back to our One Nation surprise, Barnaby Joyce has hit out at arrogant critics of One Nation after new polling showing a surge in support for the party in the wake of the Bondi terror attack. A national survey of 1,608 voters, blah, blah, blah. Barnaby Joyce declared himself humbled by the support. We'll see how long it lasts, Barnaby.
The real challenge for One Nation is can they shift the party from Pauline Hanson's One Nation to the One Nation Party?
Yeah, we were going to have a look at some speculators for what's going to go on this year. We may not have time to do it and do it next week, but I think one of those things will be that Hanson resigns. This is my guess, and Barnaby Joyce becomes leader of the party. All right, moving on. The big news around the world is the unrest on the streets throughout Iran. Jack, $1 will buy 1 million Iranian rials.
1.4 million Iranian rials.
I think we can call it. We'll even it out $1 million. $1 million.
Nearly 1.5 million. Yeah.
And so their economy is in turmoil. Anthony Albanese says he wants to see regime change in Iran as civil protests met with a violent crackdown, and that it has been astonishing, really, really bad in the last 24 hours. People being shot dead in the streets. Prime Minister said, "We stand with the people of Iran in fighting against what is an oppressive regime, one that has oppressed its people, one that is, I hope is, removed by the people, and we want to see a functioning democratic Iran in which human rights are respected."
To put that 1 million rial in context, in 1979, a US dollar bought 70 rial.
Yeah. So they'll be pumping out the $1 billion rial notes fairly soon.
Probably be a coin.
We are seeing the violent suppression of the protests. The difference, I think, between the protests that we discussed a year or two ago and the ones now is that those protests a couple of years ago were essentially focused around Tehran and a couple of the other major cities. What's happening now is a broadening of that protest movement into the regions and the smaller towns where the Islamists, Khamenei and his crew, would regard their support as being very, very strong, and that seems to be flipping. One thing I think Trump has said that if they do suppress their population, if they violently try and suppress them, then the Americans will get involved. I'm just not sure that we want to be poking a stick into this at this stage, Jack, because you really have no sense of what might happen.
Yes, I saw an interview with him where he said that the regime had reached out to talk as well. So it's all a bit fluid.
Very
Generally
much so.
speaking, I've always got a bit of caution about these situations, thinking, gee, what comes next might be worse. And we'll get on to Venezuela, and that certainly couldn't be true in Venezuela. What comes next could be worse.
Yeah.
But in Iran, I don't really think that's possible. I mean, the current regime, it's the world's biggest state sponsor of terror. It's destabilised the whole Middle East. Almost whatever comes after that will be better than that.
Major provider of drones to Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, I would love to see Khamenei and his bunch of clowns flee the country and head off to Moscow in exile. But it will be very, very hard. And so we sort of extend our great thoughts towards the Iranian people. It's in their hands. I suspect any kind of Western intervention or beyond sort of moral support could be extremely problematic.
Although I do think the threat of Western intervention might concentrate the minds of the IGRC and the mullahs.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd still think it's probably not the sort of way to go, strategic bombings, these sorts of things, but forget about troops on the ground. It's, that's not.
I don't think anyone's suggesting that, but
no one is. But beyond a few strategic bombings of government buildings and what have you, I just don't see that the West has got any particular role to play in forcing the hand of the regime, militarily, I should say. And we'll just have to see how this goes.
Just in terms of how precarious is it for the regime, the French removed almost all of their embassy overnight, and that's generally an indicator that because they're getting the intelligence, that's generally an indicator that they think the thing's going to collapse.
This is the one thing that keeps tyrants awake at night, Jack, isn't it? If there's enough people on the streets, you're done, right?
Yes.
And so we send our prayers, our thoughts to the people of Iran. It would be great to see this regime go. It would be. I mean, I know people were getting very excited over the weekend. I saw the secularization of the Middle East and so forth. There's been a few false dawns around that in the past.
Yeah.
All
Iran
we really can hope to achieve, again, what does Russia do? How does China react?
Yeah.
These things are just not known.
Iran is a quite different country in the Middle East, though. It will be richer, better educated, more sophisticated, more secular than any of the other big countries in the Middle East. It's quite different to the Arab countries.
There is a massive middle class population in Tehran and in the nation's major cities, and these are the people who essentially, have been on in that protest movement for some time. I think what's different this time is that you've got some of the regions and provinces, people who might extend their support, might have in the past extend their support to the Federation and to the mullahs, have changed their minds. Economically, the place is a basket case. I mean, the currency is an indicator of that.
Yes, but a fixable basket case.
Oh, yeah, very fixable. But right now, people are suffering. With inflation through the roof, and
it isn't like some of the Arab countries where you're building from scratch. What you've got to do is get it going again. Is the difference?
Yeah. Godspeed to the people of Iran. Love to see that regime gone. They are members of the BRICS economic group too, Jack. Brazil, Russia, Indonesia, India, Iran, China, South Africa. I think there are a number of other member states. Did you know, Jack, that economic bloc is now bigger than the US and the EU combined?
Yes, I did.
So, yeah,
But it isn't really a bloc like the US and the EU. It's a much looser organisation.
All you're doing is combining the GDP of all of these member nations and putting them up against the US and the EU's GDP. But look, moving on, we just extend our thoughts and our prayers to the people of Iran. It would be great to see that regime gone. Venezuela, what's happening there? Well, I don't know. There's a lot, Jack. They've grabbed Maduro. They've turned to the opposition. That's the Americans. And the Venezuelan military has said, no, we don't like them. So the Venezuelan military essentially supports the Maduro regime without Maduro. So right now there's some really alarming things going on with paramilitary groups hunting down American citizens. I suspect there aren't many left in Venezuela now, but there has been a bit of a reaction. The other one is, of course, the seizure of oil tankers from Venezuela that are not essentially registered. Those have been seized by the Americans, and some of them due for Cuba. And, of course, Cuba has been told by Donald Trump to make a deal before it's too late. They rely substantially on Venezuelan oil and money, Jack.
They do.
It seems like this is regime change when you can't have regime change, though. So I'm not understanding what this was all about besides a bit of cheap oil.
It might be a little bit early to call this one as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right too. Very briefly, Jack, in the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates is restricting restricting enrolments at British universities over fears that UK campuses are being radicalised by radical Islamist groups. That's the United Arab Emirates who are saying this, Jack.
Yeah, this is kind of where we are a little bit. The Arab countries understand the threat that the Muslim Brotherhood and all of its offshoots are, and don't want any part of them in their own countries. The West hasn't woken up to this yet.
But it's a bit much because, and I was just talking to my daughter about this before we came on air, Dubai and the Emirates generally, it's organised crime central.
Yes.
You would have heard of the Kinahan crime gang, an Irish crime gang. They're the old man and the eldest son, both wanted for murder in Ireland, swanning around the streets of Dubai. So, it's a tough choice. I know it's a completely different matter, but there's stuff going on in Dubai, particularly that must furrow a few brows of law enforcement around the world.
Well, Dubai is prepared to bank any of the malcontents and miscreants. So that's where they tend to hang out.
Yeah, they do indeed. And when I read my Irish newspapers, they say it can be any minute now. The Kinahans will be brought back into the country. Just
not going to happen.
Hasn't happened. All right. This is really alarming, Jack. The Justice Department, the US Justice Department, has opened a criminal investigation into Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's statements to Congress regarding renovations to the Fed's headquarters in Washington. According to Powell, marking a sharp escalation of President Donald Trump's crusade against the federal chief. We know that Trump and he don't get on, although he was appointed by Trump in Trump's first term. But now Trump wants interest rates to go down. Jerome Powell believes that the economy is not strong enough for that to occur, that inflation continues to be a problem. And so he sued the Justice Department onto Jerome Powell, who's been making some noises and saying he's not going to cop this at all. Where does this all go?
Gave the interview where he said just that. This is one of two errors I think the administration are making, in the process of making, in the same kind of area. The other one is that Trump's talking about a 10% interest rate cap on credit cards. Now, this is superficially popular. I think it polls at about 80%.
Well, let me just interrupt you. Say that is a kind of green Australian green type policy, right?
It is, right?
Yeah.
And it's superficially popular, right?
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, I'd love to have a 10% cap
Beats the
on my credit card."
28% I'm being charged now.
Yeah. The problem is the credit card companies are going to take away a lot of your benefits just for them to make money on a 10% cap.
Well, they'll reduce the number of cards that they issue.
Yes.
They will cut people out who are
Yes.
a little bit slow on the payments.
Yes. So it's probably an 80-20 issue for Trump's way now, but it's one of those ones that I think can turn 80-20 the other way.
Yeah.
In a matter of months.
It is quite remarkable that Trump is coming up with policy ideas like this one that are basically grounded in left-wing politics.
Yes, and also things that should be in the purview of Congress, but Congress has, I think they've parked their balls at the door when they walked in.
Well, the Republicans sure have. Although there was a little bit of a shift, wasn't there, in terms of a Senate vote? A number of Republican senators crossed the floor, if we can say that.
Yes.
In votes on, I think there was one about Trump's ability to wage war without congressional approval, which is more symbolic than anything else. But there have been, and of course, around the extension of the healthcare subsidies. A number of US senators, Republican senators, voted with the Democrats to push that through. So the extension of those things, which was going to cause all sorts of problems for Trump, by the way, you would imagine, or the administration into this year, have now been extended into 2027.
Yeah, I thought that was a lucky loss for them.
Yeah, it'll end up being, because that was going to, once you've got major inflationary issues, particularly around food, and then you've got to slug up with another $3 or $4 for your insurance policy for your health, that's going to make a lot of people really angry. Yeah. So it's been excused.
There are some losses in politics that are a godsend.
There you go. Minneapolis, of course, and the shooting death of Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old mother of 3. She was part of a group that was monitoring an ICE operation in Minneapolis. And almost everyone, I imagine, who listens to this program will have seen the various angles and footage that's been shot there. She was fatally shot through the windscreen. And you can see one bullet hole in that windscreen, and then with her window down, the police officer has moved. There seems to have been a light contact between the vehicle and the federal agent. His name is Jonathan Ross. He fired into the windscreen once, then sort of sidestepped that and put 2 rounds into her face from the side window, killing her almost instantly. It's on for young and old, of course, in Minnesota and Minneapolis more generally. Firstly, Jack, let me take you back why this major operation was brought on by ICE. And there has been a significant amount of fraud around childcare. Do you know this story at all, Jack? Now, there have been, I think, some 78 indictments, so it's more or less in hand. But we had this clown sort of wannabe journalist running around, and he'd turn up at Minneapolis daycare centres, and he'd try and open the front door, turn up at 10 o'clock in the morning, try and open the front door, and then say, well, he can't get in there, so therefore it's closed, therefore it is part of a wider fraud, etc. All the kids are just sitting... They don't open the doors or let clowns in to harass little kids. And so he sort of got found out. But in the meantime, J.D. Vance thinks he's a gun and deserves a Pulitzer Prize. So that was the basis of it. And this, I just can't see how this becomes sustainable, Jack. I can't see how this becomes sustainable from ICE agents. I did see a statement made from a former retired FBI weapons trainer, and he said, what we try and do is we train people not how to train officers, not how to use their weapons, but when to use them. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. There was zero, that's from the way I've looked at it, absolutely zero a justification for shooting Rene Good dead in that manner.
Yeah, well, the courts will deal with that. I've watched about
Well, will
5
they though,
videos.
Jack? Will they though? I mean, he's been whisked away. In fact, there's a GoFundMe. Well, in fact, it's a Give, Send, Go that's raised $186,000 for Mr. Ross. And he's been, I saw some photographs of ICE agents helping him move his furniture out because he's now somewhere else. We don't know where.
The courts of Minnesota will deal with this, which is a bedwetting Democrat state. He's not going to get protection from the courts because he's an ICE agent in Minnesota.
Well, what do we make of the Secretary of Homeland Security and her remarks made within an hour of this shooting death that this was urban terrorism, a case of domestic terrorism, I should say. Donald Trump had a group of journalists from the New York Times before him, and he was saying, "Look, it looks to be a just shooting. There was an attempt to injure or harm,
to run him over,
Jonathan Ross," and then they asked for the video to be played. And he watched it with these New York Times journalists, and you could sense a little bit of disquiet around him. It just looks red hot, whichever way you look at it. If she looked to be just trying to get out of the way, right? That she was maybe going to be apprehended, or just didn't want to be part of that scene anymore. So she just inched her way forward. She collected Ross. It probably would have been about 5 kilometres per hour at the most. So no chance of doing any real harm unless he fell under the vehicle. Of course, he didn't. He just sidestepped it and continued firing. So I don't know. I think this is...
Tell you what I saw when I looked at it, all 5 versions of it. It looked like she panicked and drove off, and he panicked and shot her. The difference is he's got a gun. If you panic with a gun, it's really serious.
I'm not sure. I do not have your confidence that he will ever face a court, but we will see. I love this story, Jack. Did you do your homework?
Just before we go on to that, since the demand for police officers to wear body cameras, there's a hell of a lot of body cam footage out there of roadside stops with police in the United States. And they're a disaster. Disaster on both sides. I'm not talking about the Minneapolis situation, but you look at these body cam shots, the drivers seem so often to be very cranky and really, really uncooperative, refusing to hand over their license, or a bit like the SOV citizens do in Australia.
You see a bit of that.
All this kind of stuff. And the cops are very ready to escalate things really quickly, to throw people on the ground and pull guns and all that kind of stuff. I've got to say, I think this needs winding back a little bit, generally across the board.
Well, one of the things you have seen in America, in the United States, is the rise of what they call First Amendment auditors. Have you seen these guys, Jack? Yeah. And they will go maybe to a police station, they might go to another government building, and they'll film there from outside. Now, they are entitled, under their First and Fourth Amendment rights, to film in public anywhere and anyone, whatever the eye can see, essentially, including filming from the outside to the inside of a business or a government building or police station or whatever it is. And the number of cops that come up to them and say, "You're not allowed to film and we're going to arrest you," will absolutely stagger you. And these guys go, "You beauty, please arrest me, because then I'm going to sue you and I'll make 50, 60,000, maybe 100, depending on how I'm treated," and all this sort of stuff. So it's quite an extraordinary movement. I was a bit sceptical about these groups, but I sort of understand why they're a bit necessary now.
the same. Chris Rock did a thing years ago about how not to get a little comedy skit about how not to get shot at by the police, and he was going through the things that you don't do when you're pulled over in a roadside stop. From real cases, and some of the behaviour from the drivers is it's just bizarre. I think there's a time to be polite to a cop, and when they pull you over, that's it, right? Yeah.
Well, if you're black in America, that's what they say. I mean, these are the things you need to do to avoid being shot. Yeah, look, and when we do see people getting shot without any sort of justification, any reasonable justification, very rarely are they charged, the law enforcement people. And in the end, it just leads more often than not to a large civil payout. Anyway, if you want to have a look, listeners, have a look at First Amendment auditors. They're all over social media, and it is quite amusing. Well, amusing in a sort of bad way to see just how poorly junior police officers are trained in terms of what they understand about the Constitution. You'll often see the senior blokes come in and go, no, he's allowed to do this. He's allowed to do this, But people get upset, not just coppers. People will get upset. Oh, you can't film me without my consent. Like you walk around the streets with a video camera, you've got to hand out consent forms. And they'll often have a Barney, give me a camera, and they'll commit assaults. It's often quite watchable, all this sort of stuff. But over to the Ukraine, Jack, and I hope you did your homework when you look at the second life of Denis Kapustin, who runs the RVC, or known in Ukrainian as DRK. The Russian Volunteer Corps is a paramilitary group led by Kapustin, and you would remember, Jack, that we reported, I'm going to say over a year ago, that there'd been a large strike into Russian territory from the Ukrainian army. Well, it wasn't the Ukrainian army. It was the RVC led by Kapustin. Drove there, it's like Kelly's Heroes. Drove into Zaporizhia in Russian territory, and it forced the evacuation of that city. So everyone went hooray. In the meantime, the Russians put a $500,000 bounty on Kapustin's head, and then they go about the business, that's the Russians, of trying to find a contract killer to take him out. But in doing so, Jack, they were liaising, without knowing it, with the GUR, which is Ukraine's military intelligence. And they said, yes, we'll find a guy who can kill him, and we'll need that $500,000. And the Russians say yes on completion of the work. So on the 28th of December, on the 27th of December, it was announced, firstly by the Russian volunteer corps that Kapustin had led, that he had been killed in a drone strike, and the Ukrainians also made that announcement afterwards, saying that they grieve for the death of Denis Kapustin, and the Russian media went ballistic. Here's this tormentor; he's gone. We've taken him out. On January 1. The Ukrainians hold a teleconference that featured the leader of the GUR, the military intelligence, and also featured footage of Denis Kapustin, alive, not dead, and the head of the GUR, Kirilo Budinov, had the $500,000 in cash just to let the Russians know. He said, this will help us along the way. So a lovely piece of espionage. And very successfully done by the Ukrainian GUR, except I would think the one problem is that Denis Kapustin is not a person that they would like to see as part of their war movement. He is shocking human being. Absolutely.
He's a
dreadful.
reminder that not all the good guys are on one side and all the bad guys are on the other.
Something morality, amorality of war. And yes, Kapustin, so we all know, is a former MMA fighter who grounded his military tactics as a soccer hooligan. He was thrown out of Russia because soccer hooliganism in certainly Eastern Europe it's almost a military exercise, Jack. Then he went over to train the Swiss far-right groups, provide them with some paramilitary training. Finally got punted out of Germany for his soccer hooliganism. He cannot enter the EU now because of these bans placed on him. There's a story that he attended a funeral of a Ukrainian senior military figure, and another Ukrainian senior military figure was also in attendance who was bearing the pride flag, Jack. Now, it's fair to say that Denis Kapustin does not care much for the pride movement, virulently homophobic. And they got into a blue at a funeral. They both had to be sprayed down with capsicum spray before the funeral could continue. Kapustin is a horrific piece of work, but he had one death, and he might have another one fairly soon. But yeah, it's part of a series of paramilitary organisations that run through the contested regions of Ukraine. And he is just but one of them. And some of them. Well, he was actually a member of the Azov battalion too, Kapustin. And we know the Azov battalion is dripping with neo-Nazis. So it's not all fun, not all peace and light in the Ukraine. Now, well, we do have just a little bit of time, Jack, to go through some of the events that we know will happen this year in 2026, and we'll put out some speculators. South Australian state election, the polling there, probably about October, looked like an absolute wipeout for the Libs. There's a few other little areas of complaint with the Malinowskis government that might see that come back. But what do you think of his chances of being re-elected? I would think probably about 100 to 1 on.
You go around to the payout
$1
and stand there now, you know.
$1. So that's in March. At the end of November, the VIX go to the polls, and I'm going to make a little prediction that Labor might just struggle on through. But there were some signs last year that finally the opposition had broken through.
Yeah, no, I think they probably won't survive that.
Yeah, I would think when I reflect on it a little bit more, I would think they would probably need a leadership change. So Jacinta Allen move aside for someone else, but I don't think they've got someone else.
And I'm not sure that'll make much difference. It just looks to me like a government that's run out of steam, as they do.
As they do, indeed. So that's our state elections. And around about that time, in fact, a few weeks before the Vic state election, is the midterms in the US elections, normally characterised by a pretty small rollout compared to the presidential elections. Generally speaking, it's around about a third of the number of votes that appear in a presidential election appear there in the midterms. What do you think will happen there, Jack?
I might just also add that it tends to be the older voters who vote midterm rather than the young ones.
Yeah, I guess what I'm really trying to say is big turnout would indicate a pretty successful time, but for the Democrats, while a small voter turnout would be pretty awful.
I mean, it all hinges on the economy. At the moment, I think the Democrat Congress has got an approval rating of 18%, which is pretty terrible. But if the economy still is not improving by then they've got a chance of winning then.
I think that polling figure is about Congress in general, not just the Democrat wing of it, but, that there's a real sense that, you could be unhappy with the way Congress operates on a whole host of reasons. that they were lackeys, the Republicans were lackeys for Trump and weren't part of what is an equal third part of government, Jack, the judiciary, the executive and the Congress, the parliamentary wing. Yeah, look, it'd be too early to say, but look, Trump's polling...
It really hinges on the economy.
Trump's polling's terrible at the moment. So it's at worse than Joe Biden levels at the moment. So you would think there might be some sort of reaction there, but a long way out. So, we'll keep going. The opposition leader, federally, how long does she last? Does she last a year? Does she go... does she go the year? Does she survive it? I got a feeling that they might come hunting for her fairly early.
Yes, I don't think she'll be here this time next year.
And FON, we just covered this briefly. We've got FON running around about 25% of people polled. Jack, do you think they'll be higher or lower than that by the end of the year?
It really depends whether the Liberals can put up somebody who's credible.
And what about Albo? Where's he going? This is a man a bit like Keir Starmer, who has a thumping majority. His approval ratings aren't great, but he keeps on winning elections. So my theory is, I think I've expounded on this program a few times, is that he's kind of John Howard. He's Labor's John Howard. That he sort of has a good instinct for what's going on in the country, which is what surprised me about the Royal Commission. He sort of let that go for a long time. But generally speaking, has a pretty good sense of what's going on in the country and acts accordingly. He's Prime Minister for as long as he wants to be, of course.
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
All right. Just to Europe, I mean, we don't want to try and speculate what's going to happen in Iran. What happens to Keir Starmer? I think he will be gone by the end of this year.
I don't think he'll make the northern summer.
Yeah, it's a lovely time of year to be in Europe. And Macron. What happens with Macron in France?
He'll survive. He'll just stumble from mistake to mistake and stay there.
And in Germany, the Chancellor there?
Same thing.
All right. Well, it must be said, Germany, Poland, a number of other smaller Eastern European countries are going through a fairly rapid military expansion at the moment. Normally that would cause us some unease, Jack, when the Germans are talking about conscription. It's kind of a version of conscription, and billions of dollars in weapons purchases and development. Normally that would say, hang on, just a minute here. Haven't we had some problems along the way there in the 20th century? But no, this time we're sort of cheering them on. All right, that takes us perfect timing into sport, and we'll be doing this mostly in review. We have a little bit of a chat about the BBL. Test series, talking to my friend from London yesterday. We both had a bit of a laugh. The BBC, they had their listener survey on the best 11.
Combined 11.
Combined 11, thank you. Yes. Combined 11. 7 of them were Englishmen, Jack.
Yes, I saw that as well.
Joffrey Archer.
And promptly sent it to all my English friends to ask for comment, and I haven't heard a thing.
Joffrey Archer played 3 tests, took 9 wickets. He was in. Michael Neeser, he played 3 tests, took 15 wickets, didn't get a Guernsey. So, yeah, there was some odd stuff there, and I'll just have to refer to my phone to find. Alistair Cook was saying some really good things on a podcast yesterday. He said he looked at Mitchell Starc and said, look, he bowled on the 5th, and this is all true, he bowled on the 5th day's play and the 5th test of the series, and he was bowling at 142 kilometres per hour in that spell. And he, Jimmy Anderson, went on to sort of explain that that's what fast bowlers need to do. That this is not something that should be voluntary or a sign that they were performing well, but this was just something that the English bowlers had to do. And we saw Joffrey Archer bowl lightning in Perth, and then really in the second dig he was bowling 130s.
Jimmy said he had a Roy Keane moment because Ben Stokes was saying, well, look, I really liked the way a couple of them just kept running in and bowling quick. And Jimmy said, I had a Roy Keane moment. That's your job.
Yeah, that's right. That's your job. But after giving him a little bit of light praise, Jimmy Anderson also said this, Jack. It may sound contentious to say this after a series loss of this nature, but I genuinely feel that England might come out of this series better placed for the future than Australia. How would you come up with a theory like that?
That's not an argument entirely without merit. I would say that
cause for optimism. A flogging is a cause for optimism.
No,
we'll be better for it. We'll be better for a flogging.
I'd look at it this way: who comes out as someone who you could see in the future? From England, I would say. I think Duckett had a bad series, but he's still a pretty good player. Root, Brooke, and Bethel. And Bethel's innings was...
Yeah, they definitely found one there. Oh, he got a good 40 in Melbourne too. Probably got him over the line. Yeah.
What did Stuart Broad said? He was sitting next to... he was commentating with Ricky Ponting during the 130 or 140 in Sydney. He says Ponting was just purring. It was just a perfect test match batting.
Yeah, they definitely found one.
Yeah, and then it's an age factor. It just depends. Was it 2027 the next one? Next year is the next one in the UK. It just depends. I mean, the Australian side's older in that regard. It just depends how many of them can make the trip.
Well, what I would say as a counter to Anderson's remarks is that our Sheffield Shield competition, and sometimes it's a bit neglected, is much, much better than the UK's county or England's county competition, which is also being neglected in BBLs and hundreds and all this sort of stuff.
Part of the reason
when
for
I
that
look around at the talent, the young talent that is emerging in around Australia, and there's another thing I was talking to my mate about here, and with the retirement of Usman Khawaja, I think we have to place some of the responsibility for this, or some of the kudos for this, at his feet. The number of South Asian young players that are coming through the system in Australian cricket now is very good. And it's different from the UK because you do have a significant South Asian population in the UK, more so than here, but ours is growing. But the England cricket is so linked to private schools that there's obviously going to be some alienation and all that sort of stuff. What we're seeing more and more now in park cricket, junior cricket, is Indian mothers and fathers coming along. Not just perhaps 10 years ago they might have stood at the boundary and not conversed with anyone else from the club. Now they're engaging in the clubs. This is a social outlet for them. It's a wonderful form of assimilation through cricket in Australia, but more so, it's going to propel young, talented players. When you look across the Shield and their development squads around that, you've got Sri Lankan cricketers or cricketers from Sri Lanka of Sri Lankan descent, Indian descent, Pakistani descent. It just looks really, really good for Australian cricket. We're not short of quick bowlers. We basically hammered England with a second string attack, it must be said. No Hazelwood at all. Cummins just for one test. Stark shouldered the burden magnificently and deserved his man of the series. But there's some good fast bowling depth. One concern I have, Jack, is spinners and how they will respond to the fact that we perhaps are ignoring the development of our younger spinners a little bit around test selection. Let me get to this. So Usman Khawaja retires. Well done him. Wonderful career. Made a lot of runs. Averaged over 40. So that's a successful career. 80-odd tests, 86 tests. So there's a spot in the middle order. Who takes it? Who would you think will give that? I'll give you one name. Chris Connolly, I think, will be coming into that side. It may well be Josh Inglis. I don't think Josh has done enough. I think he's a hell of a good player, ripping player. But I think Connolly will come in when he bowls the little left armers, and they're good. Hell of a good fielder and a pretty good bat. So I think that's one that'll be coming into the side. Does Weatherall keep his place?
No. Just getting back to Jimmy Anderson's comment, the easiest thing of the three major things in cricket, batting, bowling and fielding, the easiest one to fix is fielding of the three.
Well, they didn't have a fielding coach. We'll get to the UK in a minute. We'll get to England's
hopeless.
cricket in a minute. But so when you look at who's going to take that space in the middle order, there's just an abundance of talent. We look at Weatherall. I think he's probably done enough to play against Bangladesh, which is the next Test series. We have the South Africans and the New Zealanders. The South African series is going to be significant because they're a very good side. Weatherall will need to ton up, I would think, to keep his place. There's some very good opening batsmen around the place, including Cam Kellaway from Victoria, who looks just golden. And there's a young bloke playing the BBL at the moment. In fact, he's not. He's flying off to play in the Under-19 World Cup. Ollie Peake, Geelong boy, got the Renegades over the line with a wonderful knock, come from nowhere type knock, showing a really good head on his shoulders. Oliver Peake, I would think, will be in that 2027 Ashes squad. Certainly as a, perhaps not in the first 11 chosen, but he'll be there. He looks to be absolutely rock solid, this guy. Good head on his shoulders as well as being a real good player. So there's just so much depth. And when we get to England, you can fix up fielding. Why didn't they have a fielding? Why didn't they have a fielding coach?
Oh, there isn't a good reason for that. I mean,
There's just no
I've
good
heard
reason.
the reasons, but none of them are any good. None of them are any good.
No, well, they've had 4 bowling coaches in the last 12 months.
And they bowled like it.
And, yeah, exactly. And then when we get to this issue around the ODI captain, Brooke, getting drunk in a nightclub and having a stink with a bouncer, that can happen, of course, but the ECB kept that quiet. The Telegraph, the UK Telegraph, broke the story at the time of the Sydney Test. He was fined, I think, 30,000 quid. He played as captain the following day against New Zealand in the ODI game there. They got smashed, and then he just wanders over to Perth as if nothing had happened. What Australian cricket would have done in that situation would be take the captaincy off him and maybe miss the first test, and we'll see how fair dinkum you are for the rest of the series. And this gets back to this whole thing from England's cricket, that there is no accountability, that there is, you can play the bad shot and no one will worry about it because you might get the next one and all that sort of stuff. You get out to a cheap shot or a bad shot. But even this off-field stuff, Jack, that just shows no discipline, no sense of building a proper culture around a team. And let's face it, you look at Ben Duckett, there's no way he was fit. He's overweight. And there's no way they'd reached a level of fitness to play in a 5-test series. One of the bowlers,
especially a compressed 5-test series, which it is these days. Yes.
Yeah, well, they've got their own problems in that their ODI batting lineup features Brooke, features Root, Duckett and Crawley. But there's got to be some sort of sense about that.
Yeah, it depends where you put this. I saw Chris Broad talking to Nasser Hussain and Mark Atherton about that, and he was saying it really doesn't work if you have this imposed from the top. It really works when your teammates actually impose standards upon each other. He said, if I was having a bad session, Jimmy Anderson would be over saying, Brody, what's going wrong here? You're not doing this. Or Alistair Cook would be saying, big lad, what are you up to? The team needs you to run in hard, right? And that sort of thing. And he said, if someone has a bad shot, his teammates would be there saying, what are you up to?
Well, a coach and a captain.
Yeah, but not just the captain,
more so
and the
the
coach,
captain
but your
than
team.
the coach. But we're told that there has been a difference of opinion now expressed in the changing room between McCullum and Stokes. I mean, does McCullum survive? Does Key, the head of cricket, ECB head of cricket, does he survive? I don't know. I'm starting to think that Brendan McCullum will go, and I think Key might go as well. I see Kevin Peterson actually asked for Andy Flower to be returned. Oh, discipline, you know.
That was
Give me 100
amusing
push-ups.
today. That was because they were famously at loggerheads when he was playing.
They do need someone to create a culture that doesn't say we're going to get on the piss tonight, win, lose or draw. You know, when you looked at that side, half of them just weren't fit. And it's not as if they were carrying injuries or anything like that. So they got what they deserved, a 4-1 belting. And as for the future of their cricket, you would like to think they're going to have to make substantial changes at selection level, at development level, at coaching level and dressing room level to be competitive with the best sides in the world. Simple as that. All right. Well, BBL, Jack, how much have you been watching?
I catch a bit of it 3 or 4 times a week.
Seen the West Australian side or the Scorchers, Perth Scorchers?
Yeah, they're all right. I start getting interested in it about now when they've all settled down and you're getting closer to the finals and the standings mean something. Yeah.
Just the batting. You know, you've got Marsh opening the batting, and they've all got license to just go bananas. They look very, very good, Perth Scorchers. Dave Warner's side, the Sydney Thunder, they're the battlers, they're the cellar dwellers, and it also looked like the Hurricanes are in very good shape as well, and that's without Tim David, who probably hits the ball further than anyone in the world.
I saw a bit of the Thunder the other night. They're not much good.
No, they're battling. Dave Warner's made a lot of runs, but he's been a bit of a Robinson Crusoe there. So
Sam Constance looks completely lost to me.
He does a bit. I saw him drop a catch. He's not a great field, mate, and he needs to do some work on that. But he does look a little bit lost. Look, let's go to Jay Weatherall just finally. Who would be the front runner there? Would it be Matt Renshaw, or has that ship sailed? Is it going to be someone like Cam Kellaway? I think Constance is probably 3 or 4 behind that. All righty. That takes us out of our first podcast for the year. And I want to thank Jack for all his work. We did receive a few comments from people over the Christmas break, wondering when we're back. Well, we're back. We'll be back weekly from now on. And so that it should be an invitation for all our listeners to drop us a line over the journey, and we'll address your listeners' comments as we go. I did get one very lovely comment from a bloke who said, I was listening to 2 Jacks. And I said, oh, yeah, he goes. And then he chipped me into the property where the Bondi terrorists were shooting. Had been shooting a place in, I won't say exactly where, west of Goulburn, basically. So myself and my colleague Liam Mendes at the Australian went up there. The SMH had already spoken. Unfortunately, they blitzed us and they got hold of the owner of the property first, and he had some things to say there. Yes, that was just one of our listeners, Jack. He just said, I was listening to 2 Jacks. I just want to know, I know where it is. And he put the red mark, the spot on the map for me. And we sort of knew where it was a little bit before everybody else. And then the SMH moved on us. I suspect that someone else from the region had tipped them in as well. But there you go. That's how listeners' comments, etc., can work. All right. Well, that takes us out for our first of the year. And we'll be back next week with episode 141. See you, folks.